Did any of you witness a teacher at your school get fired? If so, what for? Did they freak out or just do something so strange or cross the line that they were let go? Surprisingly, the French teacher who constantly showed films featuring naked children, had us read comics with naked children, and read from books that described naked children was fired when they found the pictures of naked children. The French teacher who immediately took over for him lasted 4 months. She threw a brick at a student. I don't actually think I've had a normal French teacher. Can confirm, French teachers are never normal. Source: 12 years of French immersion in the Ontario public school system. An English teacher in my high school accepted a better paying job at a nearby college and decided to tell the school faculty so that they would have ample time to replace him for the next school year. It was the end of March at the time. The school ended up firing him on the spot and told him not to bother coming back after the day was over. It was really sad. He spent the rest of the day giving away things from his classroom to his students. I actually asked a friend and the new job required him to leave the school a week earlier than school let out to start his new job, and that is why they fired him. But still, it was crappy of the school. A teacher at my high school was really close with the students, like following students on Instagram and Twitter close. Nobody thought anything about it because that was her personality until we found out she ended up sleeping with a junior. The student body didn't know about it until one day she was not there. She lost her job and her husband, which she had 3 kids with. Everyone was shocked at first, but looking back at it, it was quite obvious something was going on. I read junior as janitor. I was horribly confused until I realized my mistake. Basically, 2 female teachers were freaking students, middle school. A male teacher was being inappropriate, physically and verbally, with female students, high school. Oh yeah, there was the teacher selling roids to the football players. My 4th grade teacher was fired because someone crap on the floor of the boys' room and he thought that he'd get to the bottom of it by lining up all the boys and sniffing their asses. I was in 5th grade social studies when my teacher had a small break with reality caused by PTSD from serving some years prior. A kid was playing with the chalkboard erasers at the back of the classroom and clapped them together hard. Sounded like a gunshot, and the teacher thought so too apparently. He quickly jumped over his desk and hit the floor, screaming at the students to run before we all got shot. He then threw a stapler as if it were a grenade and screamed for about 10 seconds straight. Took 3 school resource officers to get this guy to snap back. Needless to say, he got fired after a few days leave. That sucks, as it wasn't really his fault. I was office runner for my last period and I witnessed my English teacher get fired. It was awkward as heck because she was a B to me and I had to pretend like I didn't know what was going on while I picked up paperwork. When you're office runner, you get to see everything. Like when your bus driver is not allowed to be driving the school bus anymore because he ran a red light at 80 km/h. When I was 10, I was in a class with 36 kids. It was way too much, and all of us were pretty horrible, but one kid was the worst. He vomited in the drawer of the teacher's desk because he thought it was fun. For example, when there was 1 minute silence for something serious, he wouldn't stop laughing. One day he just wouldn't stop yelling. He sat next to the door that was half open. After some time the teacher walks towards him, grabs the chair the boy's sitting on, and throws boy and chair through the half open door. Another teacher was in the hallway and saw it, and our teacher was sent home. He didn't come back. Sounds like a cool guy. I wish some of our teachers would do that to Aaron. That guy is a douche. And of course he harassed the new teachers the most. Not to repost my second top comment, but one of the music teachers in HS mailed a raccoon's head to his boss. I don't recall why he did it, but he was fired nonetheless. I just imagine a middle-aged guy stumbling outside in the middle of the night with a rifle and muttering to himself, I need to find something with a head and remove it. Put that crap in a box. Yep, that'll show him. Didn't witness it, but a teacher was manipulated into a fight with a student at my high school. It was the student's fault, but the teacher was let go anyway. As much as the situation sucked, many people were disappointed with how the local papers handled it, mostly because his surname was Shots. Headline easily could have been Shots Fired. Instead they went with a boring title. Shots Fried at Local High School. Saw our football coach lead a prayer at a pep rally and get fired shortly thereafter. He had done it before and had been directed not to. The last time he made it a point that he was told not to do so before he began. He said that he had been told he couldn't lead a prayer, but if he did it would sound like this. A man warned is half saved. History teacher got fired because she jokingly said her favorite song was I Don't Frick With You. Obviously she didn't say the frick part, but they still fired her. Nobody knew what happened until like a week later when she posted about it on Facebook. All we knew was from a small whiteboard she had taped to her wall that said love you all in her handwriting. Her replacement was that sub. Yeah, we all know the one I'm talking about. The one that took crap way too literally. The one that hated everyone equally. The one that said to a class of kids that were misbehaving that she thought our schooling was a waste of taxpayer money. The one that always bragged about having a freaking quadruple master. Is that a thing in history? Yep, that's right, Ms. May. I'm talking to you. IDFW Ms. May. Back in 8th grade, a teacher at my school was fired for inappropriate conduct among students. Rumor had it that he was incredibly mean to his class, especially the girls. I never learned why. He also slapped one of his students in the hall, which I saw. It was quite brutal. He deserved to be fired. I never witnessed the teacher getting fired, but I read about a substitute getting arrested and consequently fired. It started with Florida making it harder to get prescription painkillers out of state, so her boyfriend went from Oxy to dealing H and got her hooked. To afford her habit, she and her boyfriend were caught robbing a bank. That got her fired, but then they found out she also stole a dozen or so MacBooks from the school too. A dozen MacBooks is more money than you would get robbing a bank. Those suckers are pricey. I had a teacher get fired for telling a bunch of students to take pictures of themselves doing push-ups and other exercises in their underwear and hand them in with their essays for extra credit. Shortly after, one of the parents expressed their concern towards the principal about why they were taking pictures of their kids like this for a class. The teacher was investigated and fired. This took place at an all-boys school, with the class in question being aged between 14-16, and the teacher taught economics. Why he didn't get caught earlier was beyond me. And the teacher taught economics. WTF. My favorite history teacher was let go of because two schools in the area merged. Locations were separate, but it was now for different level students, and this apparently meant that they had too many teachers. Because he was new, he was let go of. It's understandable that they chose him over teachers who had been working there for years, but kind of sad to see a great passionate teacher who could make almost anyone interested laid off, while keeping teachers who did nothing to keep the lessons interesting. Mr. Bus, grade 9 social studies teacher. He'd just disappear from mid-class a lot. Sometimes he wouldn't even be there at all. He'd just randomly be a no-show. We later found out that he had a passion for golf. He was a real jerk and I never saw his reaction when he was let go, but I am sure he made a stink because he had a very bad temper. My college anatomy professor was fired because he was going through all the female students' personal information and getting their phone numbers. He would call them and ask them out to dinner and stuff. A teacher in my school poured holy water on a gay student's desk, then told him he had a demon inside him and was going to heck. Hopefully, I'll see her fired shortly. He wrote the answers to the standardized tests on the board and told everyone to get a few wrong. People didn't listen and he resigned before the official investigation. I had a crazy geography teacher who bit a female student on her butt while she was writing something on the chalkboard. Yes, he was fired for it. I had this one substitute teacher I had a few years back. Mr. King, a total nutter. On our first day with him he stood on a counter in our woodwork room behind a cabinet and waited till people came in and stared them down. A few days later, after two guys were talking in his class, nothing too out of the ordinary, he flipped out, marched them out the door and pinned each of them against the wall with either hand. One came back laughing his butt off and the other was crying. If there was a teacher equivalent to a rug cop, then Mr. King was it. Lasted a month or two. Not sure if he quit or was fired, but I haven't seen him since. Made class interesting at least. My teacher left a phone of her desk. One of the students grabbed her phone and looked through it. There was a pic of her with CM on her face, and that was that. The kid shouldn't have looked through her phone. Teacher or not, that's personal property. Not exactly on topic, but when I was in 10th grade, my Spanish teacher, with an ex-wife and 2 kids, actually came out of my class. There was a large Christian population in my school, but none of the kids cared that he was gay, but their parents wanted his head. They tried to fire him, and all of the student body, even the French class kids, since he taught Spanish, sat in the hallway until they brought him back. 2 days of this and countless detentions we were assigned. The superintendent eventually caved. He was reinstated. We all went to class, and that was the first time I've ever seen a grown man cry in happiness. It's the proudest I've ever been of my peers. Dude, that rocks. Thank you for standing up for him. An assistant football coach at my high school who was in his 40s started dating one of the senior girls. Now this was back in the mid 80s, and the girl was already 18 because she had been held back a year at some point. But the administration still couldn't let it stand, and they fired him. He and the girl immediately got married against her parents' wishes, and last I heard, 30 years ago, they were living in a dilapidated trailer in rural Louisiana. Ah, love. Props to them for staying together for 30 years. One teacher was fired for having an affair with a 11th grader. They eventually married. The other allegedly touched some boys on a field trip, so was forced to resign. He was never prosecuted due to lack of evidence. A friend and I got a teacher fired. He was the type of teacher that assumes no one will be interested in his lesson, high school chemistry, and so never really teaches anything. Before our final exams, we complained to our principal that our entire class had learned virtually nothing. The school told us he was taking permanent leave, but after we graduated, the principal told us he'd been pressured into retiring early. I feel pretty bad about it. He was a nice guy and knew his subject. He just didn't know how to teach at a high school level. If I'd known they were going to fire him, I definitely wouldn't have said anything. Maybe he was just distracted with making M. Yeah, one time in the 5th grade, this sub got fired on the spot for throwing a chair at a kid. The kid has got in trouble, and the dub told him he shouldn't be doing whatever he was doing because he was only a kid. And he stood up and said, "I am a grown butt man," and the guy picked up the chair and yelled, "You little freak up," and the principal just so happened to be in one of her "I wonder what those kids are up to" moods and saw the whole thing. He got suspended from the district. My grade 3 or 4, it was a long time ago, I don't remember, teacher got sacked for teaching us how to tie a hangman's noose for Halloween decorations. Apparently some parents didn't approve, came to school the next day and had a new teacher turn up to first year HS science class with no teacher and notice on our desks explaining the teacher has been fired and we will most likely find out why in the newspapers. Turns out the ultra smart science teacher had constructed one of the most complex and largest M labs ever busted in the country. Story goes his mother was dying from cancer and it motivated him to make as much money as soon as possible to pay for her treatments. This is well before Breaking Bad BTW. Teacher at my elementary school had a notable accident where he lost it because the 3rd graders wouldn't stop talking and threw chairs and desks across the room. Our school went into a lockdown then after we were let go early. Teacher was fired and now teaches at a kindergarten. Last year my town's high school had 2 teachers arrested within a month. The choir director for filming girls changing with a spy pen and an ASL teacher for child molestation. I didn't attend the school but many of my friends went there. In high school I had a substitute teacher fired and it was only his first day of teaching. Basically he was taking off his pants to put on his biking shorts, but for some reason he decided to do it in front of everyone in class. Smooth. There was a teacher when I was in middle school that supposedly banged one of the students, pretty sure it was a high school student, but still, I don't remember him being around after that. 8th grade algebra teacher also coached football and cursed at the players. He got fired, but not before sitting silently at his desk for a few days. Those were some tense classes. The premier Catholic high school in Fargo, ND. Back in the late 70s, the Christian Brother chorus leader got shipped off to a monastery after allegations of wrongdoing with the boys in the choir. Saw him on a Christian Brothers wine commercial in California in the mid 80s. Very strange. There was a kid in grade 12 that kept telling the teacher that he can't tell him what to do and things like that. When the teacher asked him to step outside, the kid replied with "Shut up, you see." The teacher flipped the kid's desk, grabbed him by the neck and threw him outside. That was his last day. The kid got a couple of days suspension. Midway through year 10 we got a new teacher for physics. She was crap. She was straight out of uni and couldn't control the class at all, and we were a pretty tame class. There were a couple of boys that messed about and she didn't know how to deal with it. Her solution was to give us class detentions and said it was up to us to put pressure on them to behave. After the second or third time the whole class just turned against her. Even the geeky kids started peeing around in lessons and just totally ignoring her. She ran out crying one day and never came back. You guys sound like shoots. Teachers have to start somewhere. Once in 4th grade we had a substitute teacher that was pretty trashy. While we were doing some work, she decided to look at bras. Another student saw her and we never saw her again. Back in high school a bunch of teachers were being laid off at the end of the year because our high school was combining with another one. Generally I felt that the teachers that were being laid off spent a lot less time teaching and more time talking about other topics. My Catholic religion teacher got transferred to a different school after having an affair with a married English teacher. He didn't get fired and was actually a really great, if slightly intimidating, guy. He was the assistant principal when I got to the high school and I heard the story from a few older students. He was a math teacher back in the day. There was one student who giving him a really hard time and one day he just snapped. He flipped the desk with the student still in it. It was one of those older desks with a chair attached to the desk by a bar. He went Hulk and bowled the poor bastard over, totally forgetting the kid's seat was attached to it. Got a great rhyming nickname, Karate Mazzati. I didn't see them get fired, but when I was at primary school, there were several really suspicious fires in buildings that the headmaster of the school had been in. After the 3rd fire or so, the police got involved and it turned out that my form teacher, aka the guy who took registration for my class, was just a complete mentalist, and he was trying to assassinate the headmaster in a way that didn't obviously look like murder, and so he decided on arson of buildings that the headmaster was in, including setting fire to my classroom. I wouldn't say this is a narrow escape, but it is a bit sobering to realize that I, and all of my classmates, had been in a room with someone who was deeply mentally ill, wanting to commit murder, and could have quite easily committed arson on our classroom after shutting and locking the door. 5 years ago, a teacher from my elementary school was caught with a loaded shotgun in her home and allegedly growing marijuana in her backyard during an investigation. All charges were eventually dropped, but she was fired. Way back in 1968 when I was in 2nd grade, I got a teacher either fired or transferred to another school. A friend of mine got kicked in the stomach during recess, and he soiled and wet himself. When we came back to class, he told the teacher he had an accident, but never mentioned that he was kicked. The teacher made him stand in the front of the class in his wet crappy pants until his mom came with a change of clothes. Before his mom got there, I asked to use the restroom. I made a beeline to the principal's office to tell him what was going on. We walked back to the classroom together, and when the principal opened the door, the teacher was in the middle of berating my friend for crying. The principal had me take my friend to the nurse's office, and for the teacher to come with him. We had a substitute for the rest of the day, and a new teacher for the rest of the year. TLDR. Got a teacher fired for humiliating a friend. Good on ya. My 8th grade art teacher was a pedophile. Some boys came forward and said that he tried to molest them and he went on the run, but was caught shortly after. Guy had a wife, but me and my friends always said he probably was a pedophile. You could really tell he was a creep. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.